It's Tuesday on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand, happy to be back for another day. Not just any day, the last day of 2024, turning the page to 2025 tomorrow. Slight programming note, no show tomorrow, taking a day off, but we'll be back Thursday with maybe a best of 2024 and look ahead to 2025. And then some regular programming on Friday as we carry ourselves into the weekend and some more normal weeks next week. A little more vacation time in January, but more normal-ish. Now we're kind of getting through the holidays, things like that. Great show today. Andrew Krammer from the Tribune joins me here in a little bit to review the film from Vikings versus Packers, to indulge my 3 hot takeaways. Good stuff with Andrew as always. Keith Rashat joins me after that for Vikings poetry, for haikus this week to properly frame up and put in perspective that game against the Packers. Some Lions thoughts at the end of the show. First, though, what I miss, sometimes in the morning when I'm recording the final pieces of the show, I'm kind of searching for a theme. I'm searching for some kind of connective tissue for everything that's going on. Sometimes it's more obvious than others. This one didn't hit me until kind of right before I started to record. I wouldn't have recorded if I didn't have it, but it was getting down to it. I was like, what exactly ties all this together? Then I was like, okay, here's what it is. Going into 2025, and even starting tonight in the last day of 2024, this is a week of things getting serious in a lot of realms with a lot of teams in this market. Let's start with the Timberwolves. We're going to kind of go chronologically here. Wolves against Oklahoma City tonight. That's a big one. Oklahoma City, of course, Western Conference favorite this season, 26-5, 11 wins in a row. They look like the prohibitive favorite in the West. That will be a huge test for the Wolves, who have won 3 in a row, uneven in all 3, but winning close games in all of those. The one on Christmas Day against Dallas that kind of got this going, got a big lead. Luka leaves the game, looks like it's going to be a cakewalk. Then all of a sudden it's a nail biter at the end. Dallas has a chance to go ahead, but the Wolves get it done. They win that game. They make an improbable rally against Houston over the weekend, come back from 16 down with 5 left, and buries Houston with a 3 in the final 30 seconds of that game. And then they outlast the Spurs the other night. The Spurs, again, had a chance to win at the end. So all those could have gone either way. Those are all toss-up games. Good to see them win those games, obviously, from their perspective. Better to win than to lose, but still plenty to prove when they play Oklahoma City tonight, then Boston on Thursday. So that's, basically probably the 2 favorites to win the NBA title this season, Oklahoma City and Boston. If you had to look at it right now and say it, Cleveland's probably in that mix, but I'd still say Boston in the East based on their pedigree, based on them winning last year. These are the 2 probably favorites to win the NBA title. Can you compete with them? Can you win one or both of these games? That'll tell me a little bit more about this team. The Wild play tonight against Nashville. That is a respite. Nashville is not a good team, one of the worst teams in the NHL this season, but things get tougher later in the week when the Wild have to play Washington, one of the better teams in the East, and then Carolina, also one of the better teams in the East. That'll be a test for the Wild, who have been slumping lately. Let's face it. Injuries have hit them hard. Kirill Kaprizov has missed a couple games. Philip Gustafsson missed some time, and that really hurt them. He's back now, though. Other injuries up and down the lineup. They're still, I think, tied for 5th in the league in points, still 3rd in the West in points. They're still in a good spot. Just feeling like there's some slippage here, feeling like this is a spot where things could start to turn. They're a little less than halfway into their season. They should be proud of everything they've done, but they need to kind of get this thing going the other direction again, and it's not going to be easy this week. So they got to take care of business tonight for sure before those tougher games against Washington and Carolina. Gophers men's basketball team, they host Purdue on Thursday night. Now, the Gophers have kind of had this mix of conference, non-conference games over the last couple weeks. Been beating the teams they should beat, but not the teams that are better than them. Purdue certainly qualifies as a test. They rank number 20 right now. Their records are similar, 9-4 for Purdue, 8-5 for Minnesota, but the way they arrived at those records is much different. A chance for the Gophers to, have some momentum, to get a signature win early in the season to show that maybe this won't be such a lost season like a lot of us are projecting it will be. So things getting serious for the Gophers men's basketball team when they host Purdue on Thursday. Gopher football team has a bowl game on Friday. Not so much serious. They play Virginia Tech. It's the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Not much at stake aside for pride, but I do maintain that the Gophers' bowl game win streak, which is impressive, which has now reached 7 games, including 5 under P.J. Fleck. P.J. Fleck has not lost a bowl game at Minnesota because you got the 2 with Tracy Claeys at the helm before that they won. So 7 straight bowl game wins. That tells you something. I mean, listen, bowl games are not the end-all, be-all, but before that they had lost 7 straight bowl games, 3 with Jerry Kill, 2 with Tim Brewster, and 2 with Glenn Mason. So look at that. You say, that's bowl games are kind of about culture, right? They're about who stuck around. They're about who's going to play hard in a game that's kind of a little bit of a vacation, doesn't have a lot of meaning unless it's, one of the bigger bowls. And the Gophers haven't been in a lot of those. They haven't certainly played for, college football playoff level stuff. Obviously, when they played, in the Quick Lane Bowl, not the Quick Lane Bowl, when they played in the Outback Bowl in January 1st, 2020, that was a big deal. They were trying to beat Auburn in that game. They did win that game 31-24. Like, some of these games mean more than others, but some of them are more of that kind of, like I said, Quick Lane Bowl variety, like they won last year, even after winning just 5 games during the regular season. So they're not built all the same, but to win them does mean something, and I think it does mean something to keep that streak going. So that is the bigger thing, the serious thing at stake this Friday. And then, of course, last but not least, Vikings versus Lions, 14-2 versus 14-2 Sunday night in Detroit. Winner takes the division. Winner takes home field throughout the playoffs. Loser is the wild card and probably has to go on the road for 3 games to try to make the Super Bowl instead of just 2 home games. Huge at stake. You cannot underestimate, you cannot overstate whatever you want to do, under or over. You cannot properly do this justice. It is the game to end all games for the Vikings. Cannot remember a Vikings-Lions game even approaching this magnitude. So the seriousness of the week will be felt throughout. The seriousness of 2025 will come into focus quickly. And, of course, like I said, it will culminate with Sunday, the biggest and baddest of them all this week. Let's review the film of Vikings 27, Packers 25. Kevin O'Connell, Andrew Krammer just padding his one-score game stats again by letting Green Bay score a couple times in the last 5 minutes. That game got kind of dicey. They had to make some plays down the end of the stretch, but until then, I thought it was their best game in a long time.
Yeah, they got to make it stressful for Vikings fans. It can never be easy. It can never be a three score comfortable win. I think I made some quip to Harrison Smith about that after the game, and he said there's not many of those around in the NFL. Those blowout victories that fans want so much of. But it was impressive for them. We'll get into it, but for them to shut down Jordan Love and the Packers offense the way they did, and eventually carve up their defense the way they did, it was very impressive.
It was. We'll get to some of that film in a minute. First, my 3 hot takeaways. Number 1, I think the one misstep from Kevin O'Connell on Sunday. I watch all of his post-game locker room speeches, all that. Just you want to kind of get the feel for what they're talking about, giving out the game balls. I thought the offensive line deserved a game ball, deserved a little love in that game. I know everybody got a game ball because it was the last home game of the season, so technically everybody got a game ball, but he did not signal out an offensive line that I thought gave Sam Darnold a lot of time in a lot of cases, and even when protection broke down, sometimes that was Sam holding the ball a little bit too long. I thought that was one of their best performances of the season.
It was. It eventually turned into a good one. I would say that I think the Vikings' slow start on offense had in part to do with the O-line not playing well initially. There was one play where Devontae Wyatt spun around Brian O'Neill in a way that we're not used to seeing too many people do. But eventually they settled in, and early on, it was a credit to Sam for actually being mobile, getting the ball out, finding completions where there wasn't many. I thought the Packers under Jeff Hafley, their first-year defensive coordinator, they design and decept offenses very well. They do the pre-snap disguises kind of stuff that Brian Flores loves to do. And I think that contributed a little bit to Sam holding on to it, testing those protections. But, I mean, for the most part, they were able to block it up and build that wall around him. And I think he was sacked, just once in this game?
I think so.
Yeah, so they settled in eventually, and it was a credit to Sam, too, for trusting that protection after what was honestly a rocky couple first series from some guys.
Fair enough. Number 2, Andrew, I got a lot of questions about this, the end of game, and how it seems like team score can kind of catch up to them and makes things kind of weird. And some of that's just the nature of the NFL, right? You're kind of doing the math, you're trying to work the clock and things like that, but I do feel like they're a little bit susceptible to quick strike end of game drives like that because of how they play, because they are predicated on first and second down, unconventional looks, blitzes, run stops. When a team is just going to throw on them, I think they're more vulnerable, frankly, than when it's kind of the regular part of the game. What do you think about that?
I think you're right. I agree with this one more so than the first one because we've seen this, whether it's end of half situations. I'm thinking back to, I think, Chicago, they gave up a late score at the end of the first half. Then obviously at the end of the game, when they get into more of these prevent situations and they kind of, sit back a little bit, they can get picked apart. And defenders, I talked to Grenard about this after the game, Cashman, Metellus, they push back on the notion that it's that concerning. As Grenard said, when we play straight up ball, we're obviously dominating and beating them. It's when we get back into these situations where, he's saying it looks like our corners are getting cooked, but they're just trying to stay over the top of everything. But I think it still shows kind of their shortcomings a little bit in man coverage. They don't play a ton of it, but they did on Sunday. Next Gen Stats said they ran it 10% in the first meeting with Green Bay. And then on Sunday, it was 50%. It was one of their highest marks of the season. So they changed it up and tried to play more man, but you see how you can get beat when you've got Shaq Griffin in his, 8th year on his 4th team, and he's not playing his best ball right now. You got Gilmore, who's 36, 35 years old on the other side. Byron Murphy is really the only guy in the prime of his athletic career who's built to win in those situations. So I do think that there's something to that, but the Vikings will tell you we're only going to face those situations in the final 2 minutes of halves or when we've built such a lead that we can do that like we did on Sunday. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle of how concerning that should be, because at some point, whether it's on Sunday in Detroit or it's a playoff game, you're going to find yourself in a close game in a hurry up mode where you're going to have to get a stop. And obviously we'll see if they can do it.
Speaking of concerning, the last one, I'm going to push against fans a little bit on this one. I'm not as concerned about Will Reichert missing a couple kicks yesterday because I feel like he has built up enough equity throughout the year, even though he's just a rookie, and B is the kind of personality that will pretty easily move past a rough day. What's fans are freaking out. What do you think about that?
I wasn't expecting that from you. I was expecting you to do full five alarm fire.
I'm okay.
DEFCON 1 is the highest, I think.
1, yeah. 5, yeah. The DEFCON, the lower the DEFCON, the worse it is, which is kind of, no, that's not how you think it is.
I expected DEFCON 1 from you on this.
Yeah.
For you to say the O-line deserves game balls and you're not worried about the kicker.
I know. I'm zigging when you zag. Yeah.
A new Michael Rand. I love it.
Right.
Yeah. You know what? I think that's probably what the Vikings are telling themselves, and I think there's legitimate reason to believe that, because this kid hadn't missed multiple kicks in a game The only other time was when he strained his right quad,
Right.
and he had admitted he had gone into the game with an issue in that leg, and he just hadn't told the coaching staff about it. So that was a moment they sat him down and told him, hey, if this happens again, you got to let us know your leg's not right. There's no indication he wasn't healthy, though, here when he's missing what was actually 3 kicks, but one of them didn't count because of, I think LaFleur had called a timeout, or the Vikings had called a timeout.
It was the penalty.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. The penalty. You're right. So he ends up missing 2 that count. Otherwise, you take the body of work of what he's done as a rookie. Coaches will tell you this kid's kicked in the SEC at Alabama in front of bigger crowds than what we're seeing on Sundays. But these are still the biggest moments of his life to date. And so it's going to be interesting to see, because that was the biggest game of his career so far, and before Sunday's game in Detroit, and then before the playoffs. So I wouldn't say it's totally not concerning. You want your young kicker to have the momentum and the peace of mind that what I'm doing is right. But I would agree with you that Reichert has shown the way he's bounced back from misses before, especially that injury, that bad game. I think it was against the Colts back on November 3rd. He's shown you that he can be somebody that you should trust until he gives you enough reasons not to.
Interestingly, for all the close games they've played this year, I don't remember him having to make a game-winning kick. So there is that element to it. They came back on Seattle and made won the game-winning touchdown. He had to make an overtime kick against the Bears, so that's a game winner technically, but that's not. Yeah, that's definitely a game on the line. But I'm also that was a short one, and I'm also thinking, like, I feel like there's massively more pressure on the kicker where make or miss means win or lose. When you're tied and you're making the kick, I think it's a little bit different than it's like 24-23 and you're coming up and it's like, if you make it, you win, you miss it, you lose. I think there's a difference there. So he hasn't gone through the full ringer yet, but he seems like the kind of guy that is going to be basically the same guy no matter what to me.
Yeah, that's true. In terms of him not being put in the Greg Joseph spot, where I think it was 2022, he made like 5 or 6 game winners that season. They have not had to rely on Reichert quite to that extent. And then this reminds me of one of my favorite, our colleague Mark Craig has this stat of every time the kicker misses, Kevin O'Connell wins. He's now 16-1 when his kicker misses. It's just the strangest thing.
Weirdest stat, but it's true, and they keep winning. Let's get to the film here, Andrew. How did they limit Jordan Love so much, at least until, I'm not calling it garbage time because that was legit. Like they were making a comeback and it was getting close. One more stop that could have been a different outcome. But for the first 3.5 quarters, he had 64 passing yards, like nothing more than 10 yards. Like, how are they doing that?
Yeah, I didn't think Jordan played well, but to start off by saying that would be discrediting what the Vikings did on defense. They played very well. They played very well in coverage. Early on, Jordan Love wanted to target Shaq Griffin, and whether it was zone or man, Griffin was playing well in coverage, which he hasn't always done this year, so I'm sure that's why they were going after him. But otherwise, it was the front 7 playing extremely well. Josh Jacobs only popped a couple runs when, honestly, Ivan Pace wasn't in the game. There'd be times where the Vikings played with Metellus in a first or second down package where they were clearly expecting pass. They were clearly expecting an aggressive, it was a spread formation. They're expecting the Green Bay to take shots. Seattle had done that a week ago, taking aggressive shots early in the downs. And they would just run on them. They do a draw, quick little interior run for 7-8 yards. That'd be really the only time when they went muscle on muscle, and Green Bay, built up with multiple tight ends to run the ball. The Vikings did the same with Ivan Pace in there. The Vikings often won. Jalen Redmond was excellent in this game at defensive tackle. Harrison Phillips was obviously always good as he is. Their edge rushers were pinning the edges and keeping those runs inside. That was a huge component. If you stop Josh Jacobs, you really take away a play action game. You can make Jordan Love uncomfortable. And even the second series after the Jacobs fumble, the Packers go 3 and out, and it's 3 straight throws, which I'm not entirely sure what they're doing there. But Love is just taking these shots that don't make any sense. He's just off his back foot, 11 yards behind the line of scrimmage, heaving incompletions over tight coverage. I just don't think he played that well when the Vikings got him into those spots. And it's a credit to the Vikings, but also it's not Love's best performance. We saw him play better in the second half of that game at Lambeau Field. We obviously saw him find a little bit of a rhythm on those 2 touchdown drives late, but it took a change in what we talk about. It took a change in how the Vikings were defending him for him to finally find that comfort. It's just they find so many ways to mix up their rush lanes, the Vikings do. They can bring 4, they can bring 5, they can bring 6, and they'll change who they're bringing so often that Love just from the start seemed uncomfortable. And they hit him 8 times in this game. They didn't sack him till the fourth quarter. Love is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL this year at avoiding sacks. That's just one of the stats he's like top of the league in. And the Vikings had a hard time bringing him down, but they made him uncomfortable immediately. And he was those passes I'm talking about where he's floating them. It was 3 straight incompletions on their second drive. That was before they hit him once. And he was just clearly flustered right away.
Well, and I listened to Matt LaFleur's post game, and he said, like you mentioned earlier, like they were expecting way more zone. They thought they'd play some man because they've shown that in some of the games this season. But I think the amount of man they played early on might have got them a little bit off of their game plan, and they had to find some new things to beat that. And when they adjusted, they didn't necessarily move the ball all that well.
Yeah, and you could tell the Packers had zone beating plays in. There was an early play where it's just a pick play with the tight end where you got one tight end running out, pushing Metellus in a zone drop back 5 yards just so the other tight end can come behind him and catch a pass. They had stuff built in like that, and then the Vikings just switched it up and took that kind of stuff away. And it's a huge help when you can shift week to week who you are. And the Vikings aren't the best man coverage team. We just talked about it, how they're kind of older in the secondary. You don't want them playing that the entire game, but they love to do it in critical moments, red zone, 3rd and 4th down. And if you do it in just those little kind of pockets, they've shown that they can succeed doing it. And it throws off an offense that's got this whole plethora of plays and game plans in for what they had seen before is zone drops and blitzes and all this kind of stuff. And it reminds me of Metellus said after the game, I'd asked him, like, have you been on a defense that can do this, that can shape shift so much week to week? And he said, absolutely not. It's just a credit to when we say the cliches about football intelligence and high IQ, like that's what it boils down to, is that you have then 11 guys who can shift on a dime what we're doing. And he said they'll pull stuff from in this game. They were pulling stuff on the sideline that they hadn't even practiced all week. They were pulling stuff from that they had done. Hey, remember this in week 4 when we played them, that this worked? Well, we hadn't thrown that in, but let's try that now. Like that takes an incredibly veteran, smart defense to do. And as he said, not many defenses can do what we're doing right now.
On offense in general, I thought this was among their better balanced games from a pass catcher standpoint. You had, I think, 4 guys had at least 68 yards receiving. Jefferson ended up, eventually getting his. It wasn't like his best game, but he caught a bunch of passes, important passes. He got close to 100 yards. But you had Naylor, a guy who I thought had not had a great middle of the season, contributing 81 yards in the touchdown. Addison has a good game. Hawkinson gets 68 yards. How was Jefferson impacting play even before he started getting going?
Yeah, he was just the gravity of him is so huge. I mean, we saw it from Addison's first touchdown breakout game against the Buccaneers last year, his rookie year, where everybody jumps on Jefferson and Addison gets sprung loose. That was a similar thing with Naylor in this game, where his touchdown out of the slot, easy kind of post route. Xavier McKinney, whether by design or just wanting to do it himself, really drops out of his deep zone coverage to take away Jefferson underneath. And it's an easy read for Darnold, an easy pitch and catch for Naylor. And you're wondering, if you're a Vikings fan, how did he get that wide open? It's because of Jefferson. And Jefferson didn't get targeted. I don't think he got targeted till either the end of the first or middle of the second quarter. It took a while for him to even see the ball, in part because that was the Packers' plan, was to take him away. Jefferson had 10 catches, 144 yards the week before against Seattle. They watched that all week, and they thought, we obviously know what this guy can do. We're going to try and do everything we can to take him out. And I noticed whenever the Vikings motioned, when watching the game back, they had good early responses to how to take that away. Whenever they moved Jefferson from one side of the field to the other, the Packers would shift their entire coverage toward him. They would drop a defensive back from 10, 15 yards deep onto the line to take him away at that spot, shift the other safety into the other guy's deep half. They had good responses. And then the Vikings had better counters after that. They would start adjusting their rules. They would start doing dummy motions where they'd start to motion him and then cut him back and keep him on that side of the field. field. It was just the cat and mouse game that they eventually won on offense. And that's the coaching side of things. Sam Darnold's playing awesome. Sam Darnold is managing risk. He's not taking a ton of sacks like I talked about early in that game when the protection wasn't great. And then by the end of it, he's just throwing darts. I mean, some of the passes were high. Not everything was 100% accurate. He could have had that Addison touchdown early in the game, but that ball just hung just a little bit too much. So it's not perfect, but it's winning football. He had the one turnover that led to a short field and a Packers touchdown. Otherwise, the guy just keeps playing great.
Yeah, I mean that's the kind of big picture takeaway in all this is like he keeps exceeding whatever expectations you keep putting up there for him. Now he's got 35 touchdowns, 12 interceptions this year, something like that. I mean, having one of the best quarterbacking seasons in franchise history. I mean, his yards are up over 4,000 now, right? I mean, his passer rating has been over 100, like 13 games this year, something like that. Like I don't know. I don't know. The future is a long way. We've talked about the whole franchise tag thing a bunch. We've talked about plenty of other facets of this, but man, the way he's playing is kind of, it keeps blowing my mind, even when we've seen it for a bunch of games in a row now.
Yeah, I got a text from my buddy after the game. Was a big Vikings fan. He just goes, "Congrats on your franchise tag, Sam." And I feel like that's kind of
it might be
the vibe right now of like he might have earned that already, where it would just be bad asset management to let him walk out the door for nothing or for a third round comp pick, a year and a half from now. So yeah, he's just played so well into the superlatives like you're talking about in the context. Like he's the fifth ever quarterback to throw for 4,000 yards in this franchise. It's the ninth ever season. His 35 touchdowns in 16 games for people, the purists who want to count the 16 games. He tied Kirk Cousins in 2020 for the second most ever. Only Dante Culpepper had 39 in 2004, I believe. Yeah. So what he's doing in the annals of Vikings history is something that we just have not seen very often. It's Brett Favre 2009 which is incredible to say about a guy who's jumped in here.
It is indeed. Andrew, appreciate it. Big one, as they say, Sunday night in Detroit. That did officially get flexed to the nighttime game, to nobody's surprise. Winner of that game wins the NFC North, gets home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs. So plenty at stake there. We'll be back to talk about that next week. Andrew, appreciate it as always. We'll see you soon.
Sounds good, Mike. Talk to you later.
Great stuff from Andrew, as always. I think if Monday night's game with the Lions and 49ers tells us anything, it's what we already knew. This is going to be a track meet on Sunday. Lions are hard to stop on offense, but they have a hard time stopping anybody on defense. It's going to probably come down to turnovers, 3 to 5 plays. Can Sam Darnold keep playing at this level? Can he keep distributing the ball to multiple receivers? Can the offensive line hold up? Will everybody be on their A game? Can they make enough plays on defense? Lots to unpack, lots to see throughout the week, but it's probably going to come down to that because these are two really good teams. We know what their strengths and weaknesses are. It is going to be a ton of fun on Sunday.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
It's Vikings poetry time on Daily Delivery. We do this after a win almost every week now, it seems. It's 14-2. They're 14-2, Keith Rashad.
That's what I'm told.
Do you have some poems that properly express just what it meant to beat the Packers and go 14-2?
The only way to express what happens in a football season is through poetry. I don't understand why more people don't recognize or realize this.
A lot of people are starting to come around to the idea. A lot of people.
I'm glad. I'm glad that some people are, because my faith in humanity is not at its strongest.
It's being tested. It's being tested by outdoor ice in 80-degree weather, from what I understand.
That's true. That's true. It's weird here in Tucson, and I don't want to call people stupid, but Anyway.
Yeah. Poem 1. How about poem 1?
Cletus was driving It was calm till it wasn't. Thank you, Cam Akers.
Yeah. Interesting point. Yeah, I mean, they had to make plays at
I
the
agree.
end.
It was an interesting point. It was a
an
beautifully
interesting
written poem.
It was a beautiful reading poem. Back to Cletus. This is becoming a thing now, in case you guys missed the last two shows, but a Cletus game is one that maybe doesn't take all the twists and turns you'd like, goes a little faster than you might like at some of the corners, but arrives at the destination safely and properly, like you might have if you were riding in a car with your cousin Cletus, I believe.
Somebody else's cousin.
Somebody
Cletus,
else's cousin
who you
Cletus.
never
Okay.
met before.
Okay.
You don't know.
Got it.
You don't have enough
Right.
sense to. You can't. You
Right.
don't know if you trust this person or not.
Got it.
And they drive crazily, and you're not sure if they know where they're going.
Yeah.
But you somehow arrived exactly where you need to be.
I wonder, and I said this, I think on the post-game podcast I did right after the game Sunday, I wonder if they would have been tempted to go for it on 4th and 2 if they hadn't gotten that first down right there. Because you would have had a little under 2 minutes left. The Packers would have still had one timeout. If you punt it, you probably pin them fairly deep, but then you're asking a lot of a defense that's just given up 2 straight touchdowns. Do you then try to gain 2 yards and put the game out of reach, and or think of yourself as, even if we don't get it, A, we might make a stop, B, we might stop them fast enough that even if they kick the field goal, we get the ball back. I don't know. It's moot because they didn't, but I would have been fascinated to see how another twist and turn could have happened in that cousin Cletus game.
Every week I come on here and I bare my soul in poetry
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
And then you sit here and you're trying to suck me into some goofy sports talk radio talker.
It's not even a
nothing.
talker. It's just it exists in my head.
About
This is only in my head
nothing at all.
No, nobody else is.
What would have happened if
absolutely nobody else is wondering this. Nobody else is talking about this. That's why I have to bring it up.
what would have happened if Bud Grant had never been born?
That's a great question.
Wow.
We could spend hours on that on a slow Wednesday. But anyway,
But
your point is
they won.
Your point is a good one. They won. They made the plays they had to at the end. Is kind of the story of the season. They make the plays. The winning football plays, if there's 5 to 10 of them per game, they make 2/3 of them, is what happens generally.
Well, what's crazy about it, too, is before the season started, we talked about this, and early in this poetry segment, we talked about this. We said that there's variance on what this season could be. It's most likely going to be a middling season, but you could see how it would be really bad if these things happen. And I said you could see how it might actually be really good if they had 7 things all fall in the way that they needed to. And of course, I said that with the expectation that there was no way that you would get all 7 things to fall exactly the way that you were. But all 7 have.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. The defense has been amazing. Sam Darnold has been absolutely majestic, more than you could have possibly expected. They have had health thus far, right? The coaching is held up, right? Everything.
Yeah,
all
Aaron
7
Jones, all the
things.
free agents. Yeah, everything's worked.
And this has never happened in my lifetime with this team. And so it's just like it's amazing to see every single week how just beautiful and wonderful and unexpected and crazy this whole thing is.
And even with all 7 things going right, they're still overachieving. Like, even if you would have said all 7 things are going to go right, you've been like, this team could win 11 games, maybe 12. They've won 14 games now, 14-2. It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
But in a beautiful way.
It's ridiculous.
Much like Cousin Cletus.
Cousin Cletus. He's his own man. Poem 2, please.
Magical seasons cannot be disrupted by a rookie kicker.
No, I hate you hate when I do this, but Andrew and I have just talked about how I'm not as worried about this. I think he's the kind of guy that will bounce back pretty quickly from a bad game. What do you think? What's your take on that?
Well, I'm not worried either, because we tend to forget. We treat these players as if they are actually their avatars in Madden, right? That they have a certain rating and that they will perform by that rating each and every week. And they are human beings, right? Sam Darnold has been amazing in the last half dozen games or whatever. But that Jacksonville game was terrible.
Yeah.
He did not play particularly well. And in the first half against the Bears even, he was missing some passes and was a little bit inaccurate. But still has proven to be really, really good through the course of the year. I think that it is entirely possible that this was just one bad game by a kid who is otherwise fairly talented. And since we don't have a certain coach of the past who made it his life's mission to destroy the will of any kicker on his team, I suspect that things will be a little bit better for this kid than it was for previous kids who maybe struggled a little.
Zimmer would have started going for 2 on all the touchdowns yesterday after a couple of missed kicks. That's what he would have done.
Exactly.
Yeah, it bears watching. I mean, the thing that Andrew and I also talked about is, Reichard made the game-winning kick against the Bears in overtime. I think it was a short one, but he had to make it. But he hasn't, for all the close games they've played this year. It wasn't like 2022 where Greg Joseph was like having to make the winning field goal at the gun like a million times. Like, it hasn't been like that this season. He hasn't had to make a lot of dramatic kicks. He's just been very steady. And when he's on too, his kicks are not just through. They are like directly through the uprights with plenty to spare. Like, he's very accurate even within the realm of the goalpost. So I'm not too worried, but let's see what happens next week and beyond before we make any further declarations.
Well, I think that, again, he's a human being. He's allowed to have a bad game.
Yeah.
Better now in this set of circumstances than anything that might happen in the future.
Yes. Although immediately when he missed that kick at 27-10, I was like, uh-oh, because then it was like you give him a little bit of momentum and all of a sudden it's 27-25. But that's where it held, so everything's okay for now. Poem 3, please.
I hate the Packers. What a bunch of I hate the Packers.
Wow. You trying to get fined like Ant, $100,000 on this podcast?
What? I am expressing myself through poetry.
You are. I mean, you hate the Packers. You wrote a whole book about teams you hate. The Packers are always going to be number one, right? It would take a lot to displace them from number one on that list. The Saints tried, but it would be hard.
The Saints gave it their best effort. That's for sure. But so I got to tell you how I watched the game yesterday, right?
Yeah.
So I got invited over to a colleague's house who happens to be a Packers fan. Yeah. Happens, and he's a good guy, right? He's and very nice, which means it's a real shame that he has sold his soul to Satan,
to a cult,
as a Packers fan, right? You wouldn't expect somebody of his stature and capability to be involved in a cult like this, but such is the way that the world works sometimes.
It's full of surprises.
And I actually almost kind of sort of feel bad for him because his wife is an artist and does not care about sports at all. And he's got 2 very sweet twin teenage girls that are going to graduate from high school. Really nice young ladies, do not care about sports at all.
Yep.
He's got a son who's about a year older than my son. And my son loves sports. And this you would think would be this man's one saving grace, but this boy apparently doesn't care about sports at all.
Doesn't like him either.
Right? So he is off on an island by himself as a football fan. Okay. And it was so awful for him, so bad for him that he had to stoop to inviting a Vikings fan to watch this game.
Please come watch football with me.
Just someone. I don't care if you're rooting for the other team. Just somebody watch this football game with me. And it was, and all that, I do kind of feel a little bit bad for him, but it was so delicious to watch, right? Because I've been on the other side of this so many times, right?
Yeah.
Just watching the growing frustration in this man as his team could not do anything. Jordan Love had like 46 passing yards at halftime or something like that.
64, like at the end of the early fourth quarter. Like it was nothing. They were doing nothing.
Right. And the Vikings were scoring, moving the ball, touchdowns, all this kind of stuff, all this growing frustration. And then, like you said, they missed the field goal. There's 2 quick touchdowns, and you could see the hope build, right? You could see the little spark of they could pull this off, especially when they made the 2-point conversion, right? And so then they did the big analytic thing so that they could actually win the game if they had gotten themselves into position like this. And you could see that hope building. And then when Cam Akers caught that ball and it just completely deflated, it was just so beautifully delicious to see him suffer like that as a Packers fan.
Wow. That's how much you hate them. Even if you like him. Even if you like him as a person. He's a good guy.
Just enough.
Just enough. Okay. Last one, please.
An epic showdown. Somehow against the Lions. This world is crazy.
Well, that's how we're going to usher in 2025. It's, they gave themselves a chance, right? Like, I don't know what's going to happen Sunday. I give them a reasonable chance to win this game. And you just keep thinking to yourself, if they can win this game, they are 2 home playoff wins away from the Super Bowl. And that is just a weird sentence to say. They have not been the 1 seed since 98. And in this day and age,
what happened that year?
Oh, I don't know. I forget. But in this day and age, the 1 seed is huge. Like, it used to be you could get the 2 seed, you still get a bye. It was kind of like, you're still two games away, which is how they did it in 2000, 2009, 2017. They were the 2 seed. They get a bye. They get a home playoff win. Next thing you know, they're an NFC title game. You can't do that anymore. So this is for either 2 home games or probably 3 road games. That is a huge game Sunday against the Lions, which, yes, is very strange. It's very strange that Detroit is in this position because I still can't bring myself to hate the Lions. I can laugh at them a little bit when they do really dumb things that kind of shoot themselves in the foot, but a lot of times those things work too. They're just a good team.
So over this holiday season, I've had yet another birthday, right?
Yeah, happy birthday.
Oh, yeah. Hey, well, thank you. A little belated, but that's okay.
What's funny is I thought about your birthday the day after, and I was almost going to text our text chain, happy birthday, Rob, because it's our friend Rob's birthday that day, and then just completely ignore your birthday. But then I forgot, and then it was a day late and a day late. So now it's, 3 days later as of recording. So I apologize. But yes, happy birthday.
Yeah. It wouldn't be quite as funny now in the same way. No. But anyway, I had another birthday. I am close to a half century years old now, all of a sudden. This is by far and without question the most I have ever anticipated a Vikings-Lions game. Like this is
oh gosh, yes.
There's nothing that has even come close to this game. No. Not even in the very early 90s with Barry Sanders and when Detroit would occasionally pop up and win a division or what have this. And you're right, like the stakes are absolutely massive. Right? Yeah. The difference between 2 home games versus 3 road games are right there in front of you. And this Lions team is good and might be better on paper than the Vikings. Yeah. But they're so decimated. Yeah. Throughout the course of the season, they've got, 2,000 people on injured reserve
Mostly
nowadays.
Mostly on defense, yeah.
And so there is a pathway for the Vikings to go in and actually win this game and continue this ridiculous magical season. And so it's just weird. The world we're living in so many ways I know this is old man speak, right? I'm stepping into my role as somebody who's working his way into elder statesman here. Mm-hmm. But this is not the world that I grew up in. No. With all the craziness, including somehow the fact that the Lions are the team standing between the Vikings and the number 1 seed in the conference.
Yeah. But yet here we are, and Sunday's going to be nerve-wracking, tons of fun, however you want to put it, but it's right there in front of them. Like they've given themselves a chance. Like this is definitely, like unquestionably, gone from cute little season. This is fun, but they're probably not going to be able to catch Detroit. To hey, win this game and you got it. So it's there for them. I think they're playing better right now than they have probably since the very early part of the year. So we'll see.
So much poetry.
Great Vikings poetry. We'll do it again next week as well. Good reminder too, right? Just because things are getting more serious, just because this is a serious week doesn't mean you shouldn't enjoy this. This team is 14-2 14-2. That's twice as many games as I thought they would win this season. They're 14-2. Even if they go and lose on Sunday, which, could certainly happen, although I think they have a reasonable chance to win. Even if they lose, they're going to be, this has been a great, enjoyable regular season, and they will still have a chance in the postseason, even if they lose Sunday. I think they have a good chance to win, but even if they lose, don't lose sight of the big picture. This has been tons of fun. It's been an amazing regular season, and I don't want to lose sight of that even as the stakes get higher. Let's finish with the cooler. The Lions got to 14-2 by winning 40-34 over the 49ers on Monday night, a game in which they didn't really have much to play for. They could have rested their starters. A win or a loss did not mean anything to them in terms of the big picture. They could have fallen a game behind the Vikings, but then still claimed the division title, claimed home field throughout the playoffs with a win next week. So the scenario is pretty much the same. The only thing you would have taken out of the scenario is a tie in that game. But ties are extremely rare these days, especially with how these two teams would probably score points in an extra frame. But they decided to go for it. They decided to keep playing hard, play all their starters, and they got out of the game with a win and without major injuries. So that's kind of a credit to Dan Campbell, kind of taking the temperature of the room, understanding this is how they've played all season, that they go full throttle all the way, and that they won that game still, even without much to play for. Does tell you a lot about that team. It's going to be a great game on Sunday. Tons of respect for what the Lions have done this season, the way they've turned that whole franchise around, turned the narrative around. Just really can't wait for that game, and I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way. That will do it for me today. Like I said, no show tomorrow. Enjoy the holiday if you get the day off. I sure hope you do. Back at it Thursday with plenty of other good content for the rest of the week. Until then, hope you had a blast in 2024. Let's hear it for 2025.